Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and without any sort of fancy introduction, here's Mr. Brian E. Roach. Oh, wait a minute. You should be doing it the other way. You should be the Ed McMahon to my Johnny Carson. But what's up, Brian?
You know, I was ready to launch into song. I had this whole beautiful song I was going to sing after you gave me no introduction, and you just threw me. You completely threw me with the, wait a minute, and now I'm not going to sing because I don't want to.
Well, that's good because I hate show tunes. That may be a hot take for some people, but I'm not real big into musicals, not real big into show tunes. Even Disney movies, when they burst into song, one of my favorite things was watching Shrek. And I think that was one of the first real DreamWorks movies, or at least the computer animated thing that they put together. And I remember there was a spot in that movie, Cameron Diaz's character, that's the princess. She's like out in like a meadow or something, and there's birds tweeting, and she goes to burst into song, and I'm like, oh no, my eyes roll. I get this itchy feeling in my throat, and then the bird explodes, which was like the greatest thing ever. So that's where I'm at with with the burst into song. If I bursted anyone's bubble and you didn't get to hear, Brian's silky smooth voice. It's all good. Yeah, it's all good. Anyways, what?
Trust me, they didn't want to hear it anyway.
No, they really didn't. I think we want to talk football.
Yeah.
Most of Steelers Nation is happy, or Steeler Nation. I guess that's a question we're posing for Trey Essex. What is it? Like, I don't know. It kind of peeves me a little bit. I think it's Steelers Nation. But if you play for the Steelers, you're a Steeler, right? Like, it's awkward, I think, to be Steeler Nation versus Steelers Nation. I think it's got to be Steelers Nation, plural, because there's multiple Steelers, right?
I think you're overthinking it.
I don't know. I saw this on social media. This is a real thing. I think somebody actually, they replied on our Twitter to something we retweeted from Trey Essex, I think, during the game, and he did a hashtag Steeler Nation, and it's like, well, I've always done a hashtag with Steelers Nation. But regardless, the fans that are out there, I think an unnecessary panic over a very solid win with the Bengals. Again, when you're playing a bad team, you didn't want to sneak out of your own home field with turning the ball over 4 times and winning 9-6 off of just Chris Boswell field goals. This was a dominant performance by the defense, and yes, there was some gimmickry. Is that a word? Gimmickry or gimmickry? But there was something there that was not your usual Steelers offense. And I kind of wanted to start the show off with talking about that because there's a small faction of naysayers, the Yinzers as we sometimes call them, that you can't make them happy no matter what. So you have a second-year quarterback who didn't get a helmet at all last season, not once, never took a snap. He was only playing preseason. He was a rookie. So he sat there, he learned, he was an understudy, wins the backup job in the preseason this year, is a guy that the Steelers were apparently, Mike Tomlin and them were salivating over in the draft, were more than happy to move up and grab him in the 3rd round when they had a first-round grade on him, and the only reason he really fell out of the first round, he's the first quarterback that was taken outside of 5 quarterbacks that were selected in the first round, among them this week's opponent. In fact, they're in the division. Baker Mayfield of the Browns, and this week's opponent, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. So this is pretty interesting. You got 3 guys of the same draft class all competing in the division right now. And there's some that are just a little, I don't know, it's like they weren't happy with the Wildcat thing. And we were just talking about this offline and, the back rooms and stuff. And it's how sustainable is something like this? Well, we didn't really think that Lamar Jackson playing quarterback was sustainable. And the Ravens have proven us wrong thus far since it happened last year. In fact, this change occurred last year after the Steelers beat the Ravens second game last season. Joe Flacco was still a starter. He gets benched. Lamar Jackson comes in, and then they turn their season completely around, rip off, 7, 8 wins or whatever, 6 wins, 1 loss in OT to the Kansas City Chiefs. Following that loss in the bye week, they end up winning the division. Of course, some of that had to deal with the Steelers' own downfall and playing like, poo-poo. And now, here we go again. We got these two teams facing each other, and there's still some naysayers that are just thinking, well, the Bengals were bad. The Steelers got lucky, and they had to do all these, tricks and magic and hocus pocus in order to defeat a bad team. And I'm not necessarily in the same camp as these guys, Brian. I think Mason Rudolph, I think he can be more than a game manager, but I think right now, this is kind of the same way that Ben Roethlisberger was eased into the league, and how you should see some of these rookie quarterbacks eased into the league, because I think they're setting them up for success rather than failure.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Now, I want to let you know that the correct pronunciation of the term you were trying to use is trickeration.
That's a different word, man, than gimmickry.
Yes, but that's the point, is you're using the wrong word.
Oh, okay.
It's trickeration.
Trickeration.
Just ask Wolf. Wolf knows it's trickeration. The thing is, the thing about a Ravens game, right? The thing about a Ravens game, any Ravens game, is you can never say for sure what's going to happen, because these two teams, as has been well documented, they don't have much love for each other, but they have tremendous respect for each other. But this is a game that they both get up for. And other than the last time around, last year when you and I went to the game, you almost never see a completely one-sided affair. There's usually a lot of battling. It's usually very rough, and oftentimes it comes down to the end. Now, that being said, this concern with Mason Rudolph that you brought up, and the lack of, whatever you want to call it, lack of downfield passing, the dink and dunk passing, I think people they're spoiled. They're spoiled because they've had 15 years of Ben Roethlisberger, and as you mentioned, in Ben's early years, and even in the last couple years, those downfield throws, while they're wonderful and they're very exciting, were very few to start, and they have been fewer than in some seasons past lately. And the reason is because Ben's been getting the ball out really quickly, and there's nothing wrong with that. That was designed to protect him. They're going to do what they can to protect Mason Rudolph. Fichtner's offense, since he took over, and really Todd Haley's to a certain extent as well, was about getting the ball out quickly, not about Ben running around, extending plays, trying to go deep, and essentially getting killed at the end of the play. So while it is true that they have and continue to have had a tendency to, on a 3rd and 1, decide that they're going to throw the ball 40 yards downfield, and sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, all the Yinzers are frustrated with the fact that they did it, and they scream and holler. And this is the example of what you're saying. Yeah, you can't really go both ways on this ladder. Either you say, I'm quite content to just keep getting first downs and matriculate the ball down the field. I've been waiting to use that word, by the way. Matriculate the ball down the field.
I don't know that that's the right word.
It is the right word. Be quiet. and get points, right? Look, for this team, the most important thing, and I think that we saw this in the game against the Bengals, is to sustain drives. Whatever they got to do to keep getting first downs, move the ball, and allow their defense to stay fresh. If that defense stays fresh, I think that is only to the good of this team, because when that defense is fresh, they're making splash plays, they're getting turnovers, they're getting sacks, they're creating havoc. When that defense starts to get gassed, we have problems. So I have no issues at all with short passing. I don't care if every pass he throws is behind the line of scrimmage, provided that they get a positive gain. I know we're all sick of bubble screens. We've been sick of bubble screens for years.
Don't bring it up. I'm already thinking about Fire Haley. It was already on my brain.
Nobody wants a continuation of that nonsense. But, the way that they orchestrated this offense in the last game, I thought was very well thought out and very well done. They modified some plays that they'd used in the past. They did some different things. It was really, really very, very creatively done. And as we said in the post game, you got to give credit to the entire coaching staff, from Tomlin to Fichtner to even what's his name, Keith
Eddie
Butler, that everybody wants to fire.
I thought we were going to say Eddie Faulkner, who
brought up the idea of going into the Wildcat. Now, you and I have talked offline, and while I don't believe the Wildcat is a long-term successful option, it now gives other teams something they have to think about. And if they can start to do different things out of that Wildcat instead of the same 3-4 plays they seemed to want to run, well, that can make it more dangerous. And really, there's no reason to despair and say because Mason's not chucking the ball 4 or 5 times a game, 55 yards down the field, that they can't possibly win. That's baloney. It's just baloney. And I don't know that there's any other way to say it that is still PG.
Well, that's kind of where I am, and I'm frustrated with it. And you go back to several years ago where it was Sammy Coates that had like 6 plays of like 40-plus yards in like the first 5 weeks of the season before smashing his hand in the game where he had 2 of those big plays against the Jets. And that was basically that's basically what everyone's thinking about when they think of these big plays. They think of things like Juju Smith-Schuster going yard against like the Lions. And then again, he repeated that again last season. Who was that against? But he's done it twice now, 97-yard touchdowns. But you're not thinking about how far the ball's legitimately thrown in these cases. And this is a big game. I mean, the Steelers, we were talking about like how bad they didn't move the ball. They didn't do squat the home game last year in week 4 that you and I were sitting there and we're just like, It wasn't quite fun sitting there for the Sunday night game when we were, trying to enjoy each other's company and also a football game. But, surprisingly, the Steelers who have had their troubles with the Baltimore Ravens. They've won 4 of their past 5, and they really need this game that's at Heinz Field this Sunday, because now you see the Ravens have lost their last 2, the Chiefs and the Browns. They're 2-2. The Steelers are 1-3. And if everything falls into place, as we've been mentioning, the Browns got to play Monday night at San Francisco against a 49ers team coming off a bye week that's undefeated. That's a tall order. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible because the Browns, they played pretty well last week, although they gave up some points. They gave up some yards to the Ravens as well, but the Ravens' defense was just, we're going to be talking about that. The last 2 weeks, defense has fallen apart, and that's because, the first 2 weeks, I don't know that they played actual NFL teams. I think I saw that the Dolphins were going to be in the XFL next year. So, anyways.
At best.
Yeah, at best. Oh, man. Oh, geez. They don't even qualify for, like, the Big Ten or the ACC or anything like that. So,
they're cooked.
Yeah, I think I saw one of our contributors, I'm not sure which of the mics it was either Sophus or Palaya, had tweeted out that the Dolphins couldn't beat Edinburgh University, which is a D2 just south of Erie, Pennsylvania, if you're not familiar with the area. So that was pretty funny too. Oh man, okay, so I was off the rails there for a second, but even if the Browns were to win at San Francisco, I mean, we're not counting on that. We would like them to lose. In an ideal world where the Steelers beat the Ravens Sunday and the Browns lose on Monday, this would catapult a 2-3 Steelers team into first place with a 2-0 AFC North record, best in the division, and they would also have the tiebreaker over the Ravens. They haven't played the Browns head-to-head yet, but the Browns would only be 1-0 in the division with the 1 win over the Ravens so far, and would be in second place and ahead of the Ravens based on their head-to-head tiebreaker. So this would really put the Ravens in a hole. This is an important game actually for both teams, although it may on the outset appear to be a game, that Baltimore could probably lose, and maybe the Steelers are, down on their luck. I don't think Mason Rudolph is the type of guy that you're looking at as a typical backup quarterback. Oh no, everything is doomed. This isn't Buffalo with Matt Barkley, okay? this, and you're seeing the things go on in Jacksonville, and you're seeing it go on in Carolina, which is quite impressive too. But for the most part, when you have a backup guy come in, they usually are not very good, and you got to do things to make up for that. And the Steelers have done that in the past too. We're talking about Landry Jones. We're talking about Charlie Batch. How many shots downfield did Landry Jones take? Here or there. No more or less than Mason Rudolph did. And I actually charted some of this stuff with Mason Rudolph, even compared with, Big Ben. When we talked about Big Ben's rookie season, he only threw for 300 yards once. He only threw for over 200 4 times, one of those including the 300-yard game. So 2 other games with about 2.25-ish. Even attempting 25 or more passes in that range, he didn't really do that either. And it's quite interesting to think about. I'm not going to go, and I can't possibly chart all this. I don't have all the time in the world, but I did at least the New England game. And whether or not you're going to say, well, Dante Moncrief, he sucks and he dropped 4 passes. Okay, part of it, sure, right. You could also, bang your drum and say whatever, maybe Ben was beat up or hurt. But the reality of this is that Ben, he doesn't, the passes you throw downfield, they don't have a high, rate of success. The further you throw it, obviously, maybe the less success that you have versus, a closer pass. And it's not that Mason can't throw down the field. He's certainly hitting guys in stride, except for, Deontay Johnson decided to stop and jump, but he's hit him in stride too. We've seen it on display here and there, and it's been successful when he's done it. But to throw really that far beyond the line of scrimmage, really, I don't know that it's necessarily the Steelers' forte or is really in their playbook to begin with. Let's take a look at New England, okay? Let me see, how many passes did Ben complete here? I think I have 26 total passes. I counted 1 or 2 that were also penalties too, just to get an idea. So this may not line up with the official tally that you're going to see for his attempts and completions. But I have 26 here, whether they count or not. At least they were caught. And of those 26, only 4 of them go further in the air. Okay. So this is where the ball goes in the air before it's caught, not the full yards. Okay. For example, he completes a deep pass to James Washington that goes for 45 yards. That ball travels 38. It's the only pass that goes further than 15. He has a pass that goes 13 to Vance McDonald, who then takes it for some yak yards after the catch, 6 more yards. And then he connects with Juju on 2 of them, 15 yards in the air. Everything else is shorter, and by much shorter, I want to say 5 or less here. We have 19 passes that are 5 or less yards beyond the line of scrimmage. And in fact, you want a really telling stat here, 13 of them 2 yards or less, including several that are at the line of scrimmage or are negative. And, these are like little dump-offs to like Ryan Switzer, Jalen Samuels. Guess what that is? That's the same exact thing the Steelers were doing just this Monday night with Mason Rudolph. Now, Ben threw down the field. It's not to say he didn't throw down the field. Oh, no. In fact, he threw some passes that went beyond. Those were only the completions, 4 completions that were in the air of 10 yards or more. He had 11 other passes that were thrown 13 yards or further that were all incomplete, including an interception by Devin McCourty. Yikes, okay? So this is kind of like what we're talking about here. Is this the kind of success rate that you want? 11 passes. You think about the Steelers' offense against the Patriots, and what they do, Brian? They got 3 points. It wasn't highly successful. They weren't getting first downs. And is this what you would rather see? Hey, let's just throw the ball downfield for the sake of throwing it downfield versus, hey, let's set up this, I want to say kid, but yeah, he's a young man. He's a kid in our terms. We're all old guys here, old farts yelling at the clouds. But the people that are wanting him to just, throw it just for the sake of throwing it, he threw 3 of them 10 yards or more, okay? And he had the one that was the touchdown to Deontay Johnson. How much more do you want to ask there of, Mason Rudolph? I don't necessarily know that you're going to expect to see him throwing it any further unless, you get one of these plays that are designed Deontay was wide open. Maybe you confuse the Ravens secondary, which we've already propped up in the offseason with all the guys that they have there. Now, they do have Jimmy Smith still out, but they still have, Marlon Humphrey out there choking people, and Earl Thomas, and who's the other safety now? The names escaped me. I'm looking them up. Tony Jefferson, that's right. I'm always thinking of these guys that came from the Chargers. And they still have Brandon Carr that's there too, and I believe the guy that was their nickel corner, Tavon Young, I believe he's on IR again. I think he got hurt again. That guy has like really bad luck. But you look at their secondary, and you look at what the Bengals secondary had. You had William Jackson III, you had Dre Kirkpatrick, you had Jesse Bates and Sean Williams, and they were very formidable secondary as well. So you may see a lot of the same stuff, and as long as they're moving the chains, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, because guess what? This is kind of the same thing, aside from Ben taking some shots when he sees some stuff, and maybe he's freelancing too, which Ben does. We saw when Mason freelanced, he connects with Nick Vannett, who, by the way, played 3/4 of the game and was only there for like 3 practices. So that's also promising too. I like what I see. If they're moving the chains and they're keeping that time of possession up so their defense isn't on the field all the time, they have a very good shot at beating this Ravens defense that has given up 500 yards in each of the last 2 games to opposing offenses.
Yeah, look, Mason, what they're going to do, this is what I would want to say. I want to take a step back. First of all, it's one game, right? It's a one game. It's a Bengals game. They did some different things. They tried to get Mason comfortable, and they found some things that were successful. Will those things always be successful? Probably not. Why? Because now that they're on tape, other teams can scheme for them. Other teams can scheme against them. So they need to remain creative. This is going to be, a coaching challenge for this group. They cannot, ride the laurels of one victory and say this is always going to work. They've got a quarterback that's essentially an unknown, not just for them to a certain extent, but also for all the other teams. So they need to find ways to tweak whatever they're doing, right? And they need to find things that are going to work. I'm willing to say that's a great start. And that's what I think that last Sunday or last Monday night was. It's a great start. It showed that they can think outside the box. It showed that they can come up with some new ideas. That's all good stuff, right? Now, as we move forward, they need to continue doing that. And I would personally make the assumption that as time goes by and as they start to get a better feel for Mason and his skill set and what he does, and as they start to understand all the other puzzle pieces that they have put together, because, when you've got Deontay Johnson out there, you've got Jalen Samuels, you've got, James Conner, James Washington, even if our oft maligned Moncrief free agent it gets some snaps and gets some opportunities. All of these pieces are essentially new,
yes,
or fairly new to the Steelers. So they don't have a huge, repertoire of history to go back and say, yeah, we know everything this guy can do for us.
Any of them. Even Moncrief.
Yeah, any of them.
Moncrief, first year. Washington, he didn't play a whole lot last year. Deontay Johnson, brand new. He's a rookie. Samuel, second year. He got in at the tail end of last year. He wasn't even on the field. I could look up his snaps. He wasn't on the field. You're absolutely right, Brian.
Yeah. So, you're talking about a process of learning. And while, We've talked about this at various times and even written articles about the fact that Steelers fans are spoiled. And we are, to a certain extent. We are spoiled with the success that this team has had since the 70s for the most part. And over the last 15 years with Ben. And as a result, we expect things and we expect them quick. Not to mention not to get off on a totally tangential rant about how this is a instant gratification society. Not to throw that political or social stuff in here.
No way.
But not that has anything to do with anything, but it does. It's realistic to understand that this is a team that is evolving and it's an ongoing process. So to say, well, they can't, it is absolutely the Yinzers being Yinzers at their best to say things like, well, yeah, they won, but it's only the Bengals, and there's no way they can ever win doing this same stuff as the season progresses. Well, they're not going to do the same stuff as the season progresses. And if they do, we will all be right there with you saying, Jiminy Christmas, they needed to change up things. Why aren't they thinking? Why aren't they continuing to evolve? If they think this is the be-all, end-all of where they're at, then they got problems. And if it, in fact, is the be-all, end-all of where they're at, they got problems right now. But I don't think any of that's not the case right now, and it's unrealistic to expect anyone to assume that it is. We haven't seen what this team is yet on offense. I think we have a very good idea, though, of what this team can be on defense and is on defense when they are allowed to be, who they are, and when they get the rest that any defense needs when they're in a game. What I don't think we yet know for sure is where guys like Devin Bush, Minka, Minka Fitzpatrick. There you go. I got it right. Because he threatened me. He said he was going to come over to my house and smack me. No, he didn't do that.
It's a very serious threat, and I believe him.
Yeah, but he didn't really do that. But if he had, I would have taken it to heart. And I'm trying to improve. Anyway, Minka Fitzpatrick, even Steven Nelson, who has done a much better job than even I thought he could do so far this season. And whoever that guy was that keeps telling us we're on his nuts, I'm sorry, at least through the first 4 games, he does not suck.
Not even close. Did you hear Tomlin?
Not even close.
Did you hear Tomlin?
Yeah.
What was his comment? He was very un-Tomlin-like, too. Now I'm trying to remember exactly what he said. He said he cut it off. It was like cutting off Alex Trebek during Jeopardy. He cut the question off midway, and he answered, or there's a question. I don't remember how Jeopardy works, but yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been calling him the glove, so people weren't happy. A couple of people were like, hey, you can't call him J/. Yeah, well, no, I am. It's J/ for Jalen Samuels. Steven Nelson's the glove.
Yeah, I like them both. Look, for anybody who didn't live through Cordell Stewart and what kind of excitement he initially brought, it is absolutely not an insult to Jalen Samuels to call him J/. Not even a little bit.
Exactly. And I'm sorry if I catch you off in the middle of all of the stuff there, but I mean, there's the faction of people are saying that this isn't going. You can't go into Baltimore and do the same thing. And I say, why not? If they don't have Brandon Williams again this week, he was out last week. I mean, he's the huge run stuffer up front. They're, basically their nose tackle. The Browns ran all over them with who? Greg Robinson and Chris Hubbard. Their offensive line isn't exactly anything to write home about. J.C. Treader, Eric Kush, Joe Bitonio. I mean, and what did Chubb do? Chubb, I had it here, 165 yards on 20 carries and 3 TDs. They could not stop the guy. And then Hilliard, their backup, goes in and gets 27 yards too. They could do the Wildcat and then some. The Steelers' offensive line, which has had its struggles, we saw once they started to get this thing going, what they did to the Bengals in the second half of the game, they were starting to impose their will. Now, I don't know where Rosie Nix stands. It still sounds like, Tomlin wasn't very forthcoming in his ability to be back. Everyone else so far, the big piece here being Vince Williams, Anthony Chickillo, and who's our other guy? Maybe even Vance McDonald. He was feeling optimistic that those guys may be available for Sunday's game. But talking about the Steelers' offense in particular, the things that they did change last week as opposed to against San Francisco, where we didn't know about the injuries, necessarily. You saw Vance McDonald leave the game, and you're like, okay, well, they got some guys they could bring in. Well, how prepared was Zach Gentry? Because he had to come in too when Xavier Grimble got hurt. They didn't play Zach Banner at all, who's their big, now slimmed down swing tackle that comes in. He's the guy who's always rubbing the front of his shirt. He's the eligible guy, right? He gets in 29% of the game against Cincinnati, and he also played about a quarter of the game against the Seahawks too, which was a close encounter as well. And then I think that's a big change there, and I think that's something that you could see again versus, here, we're just going to leave the 5 linemen up there and hope we could run this out of shotgun or something against the 49ers front 7, which is, fantastic defenses we're seeing now as this, season starts to unfold. So now you got Vanette out there too, and they weren't just content with just playing Vanette. Gentry played 25 snaps. He almost played half the game. So they're still using 2 tight ends, and then they're using the third guy, Banner, in that type of aspect. And this is exactly what the Cleveland Browns did against the Ravens last week to run to success too. They had, let me see, I had it up here. So they have 3 tight ends. They have Harris. Who's my guys here? Harris Brown and Ricky Seals-Jones. That's the guy that, the Steelers put in a claim for and couldn't get. And these guys were playing, 67%, 48%, 30%, and they also brought in one of the one of the backup guards ended up coming in too. But they're using these guys in these formations and opening things up and just pushing the Ravens around. I mean, you always got to be worried about some of the guys up front. You got to worry about, Judon or Onawasu or, Pernell McPhee. I mean, these guys could get to the quarterback, but they did, they put some pressure on Baker Mayfield. It's not like Baker Mayfield didn't get sacked in the game, but he only went down like once and he's able to escape. We saw that Rudolph's able to escape too, and he's able to improvise. Now, just provided he doesn't make any big errors. Brandon Carr, he was a pretty high profile signing that's there and still didn't win the job over the veteran Jimmy Smith. They have Marlon Humphrey. He's a good young corner. But I think the Steelers can get some stuff done, and they're especially if they're going to utilize James Conner and Jalen Samuels in the pass game. And we've talked about this. There was the study that I just retweeted from one of our stats and probability gurus, Mike Sophis, about he did this in August. He said the Steelers, they got to utilize their backs in the passing game. And it's always kind of worked that way where they've had success using guys like this. This goes back to Mawalde Moore and Rashard Mendenhall. And you look at when those guys kind of fell off the cliff there and you had to, Isaac Redmond, not a guy that caught the ball a whole lot, right? Yeah. And they were trying to get guys in there. Larod Stevens-Howling that one year got hurt in the opening game and was out for the year. They tried to have Chris Rainey and who am I missing? Oh, Dree Archer. And you see where the success wasn't there. Then Le'Veon Bell comes in and he does it all. You know what I mean? And it's not to say that Connor can't do it all. In fact, even last year going into training camp, he was coming off that injury, and I'm like, wow, he looks really good. He looks like he can catch the ball, and he proved that he could do it. You got Samuels, who's a utility guy that could spell him as well. Those guys got to get their touches, and I think you're going to see Zach Banner out there. You're going to see Gentry and Vanette. You're going to see a myriad of these things. You may see a little bit of the Wildcat, but I think if they can get this, if they could get moving with whatever, even if it is the trickeration, Brian, I think they're going to have success against this Ravens defense because it's not the same Ravens defense. Okay, I get it. The Kansas City Chiefs, they pile on everyone. They'll probably pile on the Steelers if they have to face each other. I get it. I totally get it. Their offense is a juggernaut, but it's very un-Baltimore-like to be giving up this many points and this many yards. And you look at what the Ravens have had at the beginning of the season and who they had to face. I said it, the Dolphins and the Cardinals, it's just they still, they gave up 349 to the Cardinals and Kyler Murray and that. I mean, it necessarily that was competitive at the very least. I mean, the Dolphins game wasn't because the Ravens put up 59 and it opened everyone's eyes and they're like, wow, they're just going to run away with this thing. And I'm like, not so fast necessarily. They were very aggressive against, well, I guess we'll talk about the Steelers defense in a second because I was going to say they were very aggressive against the Chiefs. And, the Browns kind of showed that aggression too. But the Browns defense kind of did the job too, so we'll be talking about that in a second on the defensive end of the stuff. But just purely looking at the Steelers' offense, as they get more time together, you didn't start the season with Mason Rudolph getting the snaps in practice as they did, in weeks 1 or 2. So really the last 2 weeks has been it. This is still a work in progress. You got a lot of guys that are first and or second year players that are still trying to learn and grow too. The constant is that offensive line, and they gel and they get it together. They can push these guys around. I think they could do some stuff. Now, There is one other wrinkle that we needed to mention too, because it just recently picked up. The Steelers went out and got a quarterback, kind of utility guy to kind of mimic Lamar Jackson on the practice squad, so they can try and game plan for the type of things that the Ravens are going to do. Because flipping over to that defensive side of the ball, you got some guys that can hammer the ball, man. You got Mark Ingram. I didn't know if he could be like the feature kind of back, but he has been. He's been pretty solid. Lamar Jackson could still take off and do it with his feet, but he's also the kind of guy that's going to throw it downfield. Now against Cleveland, okay, he had some success. He had 3 touchdowns. On a depleted, the Browns, did they even have one guy? They had Randall, right? Demarius Randall is the only guy that was healthy out of their starters, I think. TJ Carey was playing too, but he's usually a slot corner. They didn't have Greedy Williams. They didn't have Denzel Ward. They didn't have, surprise, Morgan Burnett. He's missed 2 games out of 4 already. Shocker. But I mean, the same thing here, and they're missing an inside linebacker also. So, their defense was a little banged up and depleted, where the Steelers now, I think they're at full strength. They're going to get Vince Williams back. He's a guy that can help stop the run. He's a guy who can help blitz. He can cover where necessary. So when I flip the script here, and I'm thinking to myself, if Lamar Jackson, all these big plays that they had, or the aggression they had, what did I say? 16 passes of 10 or more downfield. He had 43 attempts basically, and he only completed like 4 of those 15, 16 against the Chiefs. They were very aggressive against the Chiefs, which I think you got to do because it's the Chiefs. I don't think they could be as aggressive with the Steelers. Let's face it, the Chiefs defense isn't up to snuff. It's not like their offense. You're just trying to do a shootout there and see who could score the most points. It's just one of those, it's a leaky faucet, so to speak, when you're talking about the Chiefs defense. I don't see the same thing here with the Steelers. I think the only thing is going to be, you started to get a little bit of rapport because you got Barron and Bush playing next to each other. Now you got to insert Vince Williams back in, healthy. He's off the injury report finally. You got to insert him into these plans, but he's a veteran guy too. So I believe that actually is going to help, because now you could use Barron in different circumstances too, and everybody else is at full strength. Cam Hayward's still a grown-ass man. So I think where I want to say is that Vince Williams is a key component, because the Ravens might try and run the ball, and teams have had success running the ball against the Steelers, but I think they're going to button that up a little bit as well. Now that they've gotten a few games together, the communication should be better. And now they might, with Minkah Fitzpatrick back there, you might not have as many things to worry about. In fact, the Steelers secondary, we might start talking about them as being one of the better ones, even over maybe the Ravens or Bengals.
It's certainly possible. Look, I mean, here's a really simple analysis for you. Steelers defense better than the Dolphins?
Maybe.
Maybe. Get out of town. You're talking about a high school team.
Well, I mean, when they played the Dolphins, Minkah was there, so he's already got the looks too. He's already prepared for this team.
Talking about one guy,
yeah,
okay, right?
Yeah.
Take Minkah off the Dolphins, and leave just Minkah on the Dolphins. Steelers defense still better than the Dolphins defense. Not even a question.
Okay.
Better than the Cardinals defense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Better than the Chiefs defense?
Well, the Chiefs defense is probably better than the Dolphins or the Cardinals, I would think. But
I would think,
but I don't think they're
still a leaky faucet, as you said.
Oh, their secondary is rough. It is very rough. Yes.
So Steelers defense is now we get to the Browns, and look, you can make arguments that the Browns defense could be as good or better than the Steelers defense. You could make arguments the other way.
No, you can't. I don't think so, because I don't think their secondary, and especially haven't been healthy, they haven't proven anything in the secondary. I think Denzel Ward is maybe their shining star corner. I think the rest of the guys, you don't know. Greedy Williams, Morgan Burnett, I don't know. That's kind of sketchy there. But I think people would make that argument with the pass rushers, especially like that front four.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes. So you can make what my point is, I guess, if they're healthy, you can make the argument. But I'm going to say right now, I think that the way the Steelers are playing at the moment, they're a better defense. So that you're talking about a Ravens team that scored 25, 28, 23 against those last 3 teams, 59 against the Dolphins. But as I said, JV team. And, it's very reasonable to assume that the Ravens could have problems scoring. Yes, there is some concern about their run game and the fact that they are such a run-heavy team. But the Steelers did a pretty good job against a pretty good back on Monday night in Joe Mixon. Didn't allow a lot of rushing yards to go through. They will have to maintain that and play, a elevated run defense so that they are able to contain that offense. But I think it's realistic to expect that this is conceivably the best defense the Ravens will have played thus far this year. And, the Ravens, the Ravens defense, as you said, is not the Ravens defense of old. We said that at the beginning of the year, and adding injuries to that crew actually just makes it worse. I'm not saying they're bad. It's just not the defense where you go, oh my God, we're never going to be able to move the ball. There is certainly reason to be optimistic. I feel cautiously optimistic about this game. I will say that my hesitance has to do with simply the fact that in these rivalry games, you sometimes never know what can happen, and so things can go a little haywire as has happened at times in the past. But on paper, there's no reason to just assume the Ravens are going to come into Heinz Field and walk all over the Steelers. I don't think that's even remotely a realistic way to look at this game.
Well, you got to look at their weapons. I mean, there's Hollywood Brown. He's fast and shifty. I think the Steelers' safeties are capable of containing. I think the biggest problem is, the plethora of great word always. The plethora of the tight ends that the Baltimore Ravens have, and I guess the surprise is that over what's his name, Hayden Hurst, hasn't really done much of anything. It's been Mark Andrews has been the guy, and then Nick Boyle is the one that they signed to that extension. So that's their outlet there. A lot of times, they almost kind of, and you said this, you've been saying this for over a year now, ever since they drafted Lamar Jackson, that they were going to have to change the offense and to make it look more like what Lamar Jackson did in college, and it kind of resembles that in some ways, By the way, I found the quote, the Tomlin quote on Steve Nelson. It was, "He's doing great." He interrupted with that. He's doing great. And that's precisely it. Steve Nelson, Mike Hilton had a game and a half. I don't trust the Ravens receivers lining up against the Steelers secondary. I think where it's at is going to be, what they do with the tight ends. And you know what? They kind of bottled up George Kittle. He's gonna beat you sometimes here or there.
Yeah.
There was nothing out of Tyler Eifert whatsoever, and a lot of that has to do with the Bengals' offensive line is just trash. But looking at it the same way too, I hate, it's tough to make the comparisons. It's always tough to just put everything up because it's not always, apples and apples. It's going to be apples and oranges and grapes and other things too. But I mean, the Browns were able to get to Lamar Jackson 4 times. And I could see the Steelers having similar success up front there. And if they get that pressure, he's forced to make mistakes. And the Ravens made a bunch of mistakes. They hadn't turned the ball over at all heading into that game last week with the Browns. And Lamar Jackson was picked twice. The way the Steelers are creating splash plays and turnovers, which they haven't been able to do in the better part of this decade, ever since a whole lot of those guys retired from the last Super Bowl appearance and the great defense that they had, they're doing it like we are expecting it now. And I kind of do expect it again this week. I mean, it's not like Mark Ingram isn't prone to maybe put the ball on the ground. It's not like Lamar Jackson isn't prone to throw a pick. I don't see like Willie Snead or some of these other guys running all over, just causing havoc for the Steelers. And we're talking about coverage sacks. I mean, this can be very much so a reality. I think Mark Andrews is part of the game plan, limiting the tight ends, making sure Lamar Jackson doesn't use his feet and go all over. That was Russell Wilson at the end of the game when the defense was gassed for being on the field an extra 12 minutes of actual game time, and whatever it was in real time is probably more like 40 minutes or something by the time you take all the stops, breaks, TV timeouts, and things of that nature, replays. Yep. I mean, it's just and you're at home. You're at home. And for those, I mean, there's still a lot of new guys. They might not be familiar with this rivalry, but there's still a lot of veterans that are there that have played against the Ravens over the years. TJ Watt has had success against them. Cam Hayward has had success against them. Stephon Tuitt is playing out of his mind right now. I might be a little more bullish this week than usual, because had I not seen the Browns just totally handle the Ravens in Baltimore, no less, just totally handle them. Now the Ravens got to go on the road and come to Pittsburgh, and I like this game being in Pittsburgh. I like what the Steelers did last week versus what the Ravens didn't. They're going to try and correct these problems, but their defense has been leaky. Okay, so if they don't give up 500 yards, even if they're giving up like 350 or so, that means the Steelers are going to have time of possession. They should have some meaningful drives and at least put some points on the board, and I'm convinced that the Steelers' defense, they could hold them under 20 easily. They may even be able to hold them in the, I don't know about that. I don't want to say like the 10 range and be that bullish. But again, you look at the defenses that the Ravens have played. I mean, they're putting up points, 59, 23, 28, 25. The offense has been getting it done. But again, you know, they have 480. They're like tied for first in the NFL, 482 and a half yards of offense, but it's because they're playing like a lot of bad defenses. I don't know if they can make the Steelers look that foolish or not. I get that the Steelers gave up oodles of rush yards against the Seahawks and the 49ers, but again, it's that time of possession. This is going to be the Steelers' offense controlling the ball, having some drives, and I believe they could have the same kind of success that the Browns had in running the football, which chews up some clock too. And then, you know, there's no reason why Mason Rudolph can't complete a handful of passes that go further than 10 yards here or there when required to. Otherwise, the dink and dunk will be just fine, I think. I don't think that's going to be a major problem. It's going to stretch their D just the same way when teams do it against the Steelers defense. So I think that's what I'm really looking at here. And, I mean, the Steelers offense, as long as they keep Mason upright, you know, I mean, they did it against the Bengals. They've done it so far this year, you know, mostly with the 49ers, Seahawks, and the Patriots. All those defenses have been great defenses that the Steelers offense has faced. Except for the Bengals. They have some specialists. They still have some talent, but I think we know the wheels are coming off in Cincinnati. It's just completely off. I have no idea what's going on there. I don't know if it's coaching changes. You know, that's the other thing that happens, Brian. Everybody wants everyone's head. They finally get the guy out of there. Would Marvin Lewis have done any better there? Who knows? He's been a proven loser, but you know, it's a consistency thing versus not having it. And you see what happens when the Steelers at least have that consistency here. For all the people who said that their coaching staff couldn't adjust, they adjusted all over the place, and I think they'll continue to paraphrase, or maybe to direct quote Mike Tomlin here. When you have red paint, paint the barn red.
Yeah. Look, we have the offense that we have. We got to get used to dealing with it. We've got a solid defense that is on the verge of becoming potentially a very good defense. I hesitate to say elite or great, but it's within their grasp. Both of those kinds of descriptors are within their grasp. This is a team that, while look, I'm not saying that they're going to win out, and I don't know that I look at this after one game and go, they're definitely going to win this Sunday. But I think there's a reasonable chance that they can win this Sunday. I think it's better than even. It's maybe 70-30. I think this, again, based on what we've seen from the Ravens so far this season, against the competition that they have played against, and once they've actually had to play against decent competition, there's no reason to think this is not a game the Steelers shouldn't win. They should win this game. Same thing I said about the Cincinnati game. They should win that game. They did so in a very dominant fashion. I don't know if they're going to win this in a dominant fashion, but they could. And if we come out of this game, you know, with the victory at 2-3, and San Francisco does what they need to do out in San Francisco, you're talking about a first-place team in their division, even at 2-3. Opens up the rest of the season for complete optimism again. You can look at it and say, you know, I said this before, I'm not going to say this is a Super Bowl-bound team, but it is no longer a team destined to give up the number 1 pick to the Dolphins for Minkah Fitzpatrick. It's not that bad. We should have a successful season, and we should, at the end of this year, be able to know for sure whether Mason Rudolph is the guy of the future.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, like I said, he still passes the eyeball test. And when you're completing like 85 and over 85.5% of your passes, there's a drop here or there. I don't know that he's necessarily putting the ball in dangerous spots. And the few that we saw were incomplete, miscommunication, or as we thought, maybe jersey pull on the one. We really aren't sure what happened on that. But, those things even happen with Ben. I mean, it just happens. It's human. It's completely human. There's no reason to think otherwise. I was going to ask you one thing, though, that, I find maybe necessarily surprising this season. One of the more surprising things with the Steelers this season is that Stephon Tuitt is leading the team in sacks with 3.5.
I cannot express my joy and happiness over this. As much as I have a bromance with Cam Hayward, as much as Cam Hayward is my OG grown-ass man, I am thrilled that Stephon Tuitt is having the kind of season that he's having, because we've been waiting for it. And hopefully, again, in past seasons, it seemed like he's been gangbusters to come out of the gate and then has faded away. This needs to be a consistent effort from him, hopefully staying, free of any mishaps, and push forward to the season. I've said it every year. This could be the year when he gets a double-digit sack total. And it would be, can you imagine if TJ, Stephon, Cam all end up with double-digit sacks? I mean, you're talking when Tuitt is playing at this level with Cam on the other side and Bud playing at the best he's played in his career, TJ on the other side, that is a fearsome foursome. And other teams are not going to be happy to see them. And you have to decide, who am I double teaming? Am I going to double team Stephon Tuitt and allow Cam Hayward to knock the guy he's getting blocked by back into the quarterback? Am I going to double team both of them and hope my tight ends can handle Dupree and TJ? What are you going to do? I love it. It makes me so happy that I could pee.
Well, I don't know what to say about that, to be completely honest. Like, what do you say about that? I was looking up a couple things too that have been a huge difference maker with the Steelers. Defensively, they're tied for 4th. They're right there with the Browns, 14 sacks for each of those teams. That's 3 behind the Bears, 4 behind the Patriots, and the Panthers, who are first in the league so far. So they get to the quarterback. The Ravens have only had 8 all year. They had 3 against the Dolphins quarterbacks in that first game, and then they had another 3 against Kyler Murray. So they've only had 2 sacks in each of their last 2 games against Mahomes and Baker Mayfield, which I think is a pretty telling stat. And another pretty big one here too is you talk about field position and specialist. Jordan Berry is having a heck of a season as well. He's averaging 48.1 yards per punt with his net and stuff. He's punted the ball 18 times. There's guys that have kicked for more yards and punted a lot more this season, but he's almost near the top 5 when it comes to average punting this season, and that's very important too when you're just trying to. You don't want anybody on your doorstep. When you fumble the ball on the second play of the game like they did against Cincinnati, leaves it right on the doorstep. Same thing with the 49ers with James Conner's fumble. And then it makes it very difficult for the defense to keep somebody out of the end zone versus, again, it's the probability and the percentages of if they're backed up further, then they're not going to get in the end zone. And that's Jordan Berry, the tip of the cap right now, at least for that. And definitely better than he was playing last year. So we'll keep an eye on this injury report, because I think Brandon Williams is the big one here to see, because he could be the one that could really disrupt the Steelers' plans to do something very similar there. If he's off the field, I mean, all bets are off. It could be a very Nick Chubb-like performance for James Conner and or Jalen Samuels, I think you'll see a little bit of the Wildcat. But really, how much of the Wildcat did we see? What was it, 5 snaps, 6 snaps that they ran it? I think that's all the more that there was last week. So it's not like this is like their primary offense. They're without a quarterback. They're down to like a tight end pretending to be quarterback. I guess Vance McDonald was the emergency guy back in Seattle. Did you know that one, Brian? Did you hear that? Yeah, I mean, that's always crazy to me. I guess it's just like, is that the default for most teams? Is that a tight end would throw the football? I don't know what you do there then. I'd rather have Jalen Samuels handle the ball in that case. Yeah. But, I'm just – there is the window of opportunity. The other thing I did want to point out, too, is that Jarvis Landry – and there was a big play by Ricky Seals-Jones, too. But Jarvis Landry caught 8 balls to the tune of 167 yards with a 65-yard long against the Ravens secondary, too. Things could open up. Maybe we'll finally see Juju Smith-Schuster have that breakout game we've been waiting for that didn't happen in the month of September.
From your mouth to Juju's hands and feet.
Sure. Knees and toes.
Yeah. Like I've said, I think that there is reason to be optimistic about this game, and that is more than enough reason to feel confident watching the game, hopeful watching the game, provided that they play smart ball the way they did against the Bengals, other than the one fumble, and avoid those kind of mistakes from a team that is not getting turnovers at the rate that they oftentimes do. The Steelers are, I think, +4 overall in the season, and the Ravens are only +1. They're not forcing the turnovers the way they normally do. So if we can come out ahead in that area and keep time of possession close, I think the Steelers come out on top in this game.
Yeah, and they're right now it's +3.5 for the Steelers. So again, they're predicting a tight game, over under 44.5. I don't know. We'll see how that ends up working out. Those games, these games traditionally were always like the slobber knockers, low scoring, field goal affairs, Justin Tucker versus Swaysham or Boswell. I don't necessarily see the same thing playing out here. I think the Steelers can certainly I really do feel good about their odds for victory here, and maybe taking first place in the AFC North after all the dust settles after the aftermath and whatnot. So, hey, Brian, thanks once again for joining me today. It's another one of those, we're wait and see, you know what I mean? If they have success like they did last week, I know as the Bengals, it's still a divisional game. We're going to see what ends up happening, guys. I don't know. Are the Ravens for real? Are the Steelers for real? We're about to find out all the answers to these questions in a very short time.
Absolutely. And unlike the normal week, I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Oh, I know. We're going to just don't burst into song, please, when I see you.
I promise I won't do it at the game.
I have Brian's ticket, so it will be withheld if he attempts anything like that. I'd rather just give it to, like, I'll just see somebody, random person walking on the street. It's, as they're always, you know what? I got one other thought. It just popped in my brain just thinking that, because I was about to say, like, yeah, some guy wearing a Patriots jersey or something. If you attend like a football game, I don't care. Like, I guess I'm going to pose this to some. I know there's Steelers fans that are displaced all around the world here. Do you go to like a different game? Let's say you go to like, I don't know, the Chargers and Chiefs, and it's in Kansas City, and wear a Steelers jersey because you're a Steelers fan. I mean, I would just as well just wear, like a jersey too. Like, ball cap might be a little more low key, but I think it takes a lot of guts to wear the jersey of a team that isn't even playing. One year, there was a guy that was sitting next to us. I think it was Steelers were playing the Lions or the Packers. Maybe that was back a couple years ago when Aaron Rodgers was hurt. Whatever be the case, the other guy was a fan of the other divisional team, and he was there with his buddy. And he's like, well, yeah, I'm a Lions fan, and we're watching the Packers, and he's there with the Packers, and he's got a Lions jersey on, and it's like, it's not even a good team to begin with. I just, there's random things that happen like that. I know there's some cities where, they have to give away tickets, but I'm talking about like Heinz Field or like, these big matchups and big games. I got to hear from other people. I mean, I did a tour of the Cowboys Stadium. I wore my Hines Ward jersey and stood on the Dallas Star and took a picture because, I got cojones here, And, man, I took a lot of crap for it too, but it's okay. But, I mean, in an actual game, would you do something like that? I mean, I know it's like I know you're black and gold till you're dead and cold, but I don't know. It just seems a little weird to me, and I see people do it sometimes at Heinz Field. You'll see something like random, like a Seahawks jersey, and it's like we're going to be going to see the Ravens and Steelers.
I'll tell you, I don't own any jerseys other than the Steelers.
Yeah, obviously, but I mean, wear a polo shirt.
You this. Here's the thing. I have worn a jersey. I wore a different jersey for the first 3 games, and on a Monday night, because of course I was coming home from work and I didn't wear a jersey to work, I did not wear a jersey, and they won. So Sunday, because yes, I'm weirdly superstitious at times, I'm not wearing a jersey. I will have Steelers gear on, but I'm not wearing a jersey. So that just be prepared for the fact that I will not be completely 100% geared up. But to answer your question directly, I would not hesitate to wear my Steelers colors wherever I went. And if somebody insisted that I be forced to go watch some other teams play that I didn't care about, the hell with them. I'm wearing my Steelers jersey.
Okay, well, I guess that settles it. But, well, that'll do it for us, folks. Once again, my name's Joe. His name's Brian. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave a review where possible. We truly appreciate it. We encourage all of our listeners, as always, to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.